Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today we're going to be talking about 10 amazing new release movies you can currently catch on Hulu, of all places. So Hulu, let's face it, is not really known for having a great movie selection, or at least not a big one, but right now, not only do they have some great movies, they've got 10 really good new release movies. And we're gonna start this list off all the way at the back with a sci-fi horror flick from Russia called SPUTNIK. Now, SPUTNIK is foreign language, but they do have a pretty decent dubbed version included with Hulu, so you can go dubbed or with subtitles on this one. But in SPUTNIK, someone returns from space and does not appear to be the same person that left, or at least that's the lightest way that I can put it. For a space-centric sci-fi horror movie, SPUTNIK is pretty slow paced, but it's really well produced. It's got a great look to it. It's well acted as far as I can tell. I mean, I don't speak the native language, but it seems to be very well acted, and more importantly, it's got a very interesting concept. There's something going on in this movie that is very interesting for this genre. They're not rehashing the same thing we've seen over and over again. There's a little bit of familiarity there, but for the most part, this is a really fresh take on this genre. My next pick is titled Small Engine Repair, and as dopey as that title might sound, this is actually a pretty good movie, but it is also really slow paced, so it's only going to be for people who like this genre. But if you like the way that I describe it, then Small Engine Repair is probably going to be for you. Jon Bernthal actually stars in this, and three lifelong friends have a falling out, and after a long time of being estranged from each other, they get called back together for a night of partying. However, the friend that called them together has some ulterior motives, and this movie does get very dark, and it does take quite a long time to get where it's going. In fact, I started to get a little bit antsy and impatient with this movie, just wondering if it was going to go somewhere. It eventually does. I don't quite want to call this a crime movie, yet it definitely does fit into that genre. Just don't expect a lot of crimes happening, otherwise you'll be disappointed. But if you generally like movies that sort of take place in this environment and these types of stories, again, this one is dark and upsetting, but it's very well acted and it's very interesting. It's just kind of a smaller story compared to a lot of the other stuff on this list. Alright, my next two picks are great picks for the family. They're big blockbuster movies though, I'm sure you've heard of them. They're both animated, or at least somewhat animated. The first being The CROODS, A New Age. Now, I am a longtime fan of the original The CROODS. I do think that is the better movie. It's got a better look to it, it's got a better story, everything, but The CROODS is a decent follow-up. In fact, it's a lot different from the original because it's so much more colorful. In fact, the sequel takes place sort of in the realm that they're trying to get to the entire first movie. So that part's interesting. There's some good new voice actors, and more importantly, it's really funny. In fact, I think it's funnier than the original, even if it's not as grand of an adventure as the original The CROODS. It made me laugh a lot while watching it with the kids, which is always a bonus. And then before getting back to some movies that are definitely not for the kids, Sonic the Hedgehog, I think, exceeded all expectations, especially mine. I liked playing Sonic when I was a kid, not a huge fanboy or anything like that, and just sort of expected this to be a run-of-the-mill movie. However, while the story and the setup and everything is pretty run-of-the-mill, it's pretty straightforward and basic. It's something you've seen a lot of times before. The voice actor doing Sonic is really funny. A lot of the other characters are great. Jim Carrey appears to be having sort of the most fun I've seen him have in a while. He's really been struggling with the fun meter over the past 10 years or so, but he found it with Sonic, and it is a fun movie. Not only is there a sequel about to come out, but they've already greenlit a third one. There's even going to be a spin-off on Paramount Plus for Knuckles with the voice of Idris Elba. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on with this because the first movie was exceptional, again, for this genre. Okay, I know I keep using the word genre a lot, and I'm going to try to stop, but my next pick is from the son of David Cronenberg. If the name David Cronenberg doesn't ring any bells, there's a slim chance you're going to enjoy Possessor. Now, this is another sci-fi flick that I think technically edges into horror. There's a lot of bloodshed in Possessor because it's about an assassin in the future that is able to assume the identity of another person, basically possess them almost quite literally. It's pretty wild stuff, and it's got a very interesting flair to it, the way that it was directed. It does have a slower pace, however, it can be incredibly intense at times, from the very beginning of the movie, in fact. I personally really enjoyed the cinematography. I also really enjoyed the way it was written. It felt very natural and real. It didn't feel scripted. I mean, the leading roles are killing it, but in supporting roles, you've got Sean Bean and Jennifer Jason Leigh, so there's a lot of really cool stuff with this movie. If you generally like dark sci-fi indie flicks, trust me, Possessor is gonna be the one for you off this list. Alright, we're midway through the list, and it's an important time to remind you that not all these movies are going to be available on Hulu forever, and depending on where you are in the world right now, they may not be available to you right now. But you can access all these movies and more using today's sponsor, CyberGhost VPN. Like all VPNs, CyberGhost keeps your web browsing safe, secure, and private. They keep no logs. It is a smart idea to invest in a VPN right now. I personally use CyberGhost because they have specialized servers that allow me to browse Netflix, Hulu, Prime Video, HBO Max, Disney, all the major streaming services. I can browse them in a variety of countries, which means they have vastly different offerings just with the flick of a switch in my CyberGhost app. CyberGhost is super easy to use. They have a 45-day money-back guarantee. That's 6 weeks to get your money back if you're not happy with it, which is pretty incredible. And if you have any trouble with anything, like getting it set up on specific devices, they've got great 24/7 customer support. But speaking of devices, you're gonna be able to use CyberGhost on up to 7 devices at the same time. And it's all the different types of devices you already use to stream movies and shows. So go to the link in the description below, and right now my viewers can pay $2.19 a month. That is incredibly low to unlock vast new libraries of movies and shows. And no, not just foreign shows, big budget American stuff that is not available on streaming services here. It's available in other countries, and again, flick of a switch and you can be watching all of it. It is an amazing deal, but let's go ahead and move on with the rest of this list. Alright, we've got a couple of top shelf horror movies coming up, as well as some action flicks, and my number one pick, which is going to be one of the best hidden gems from last year that nobody talked about. My number 5 pick, though, is Saint Maud. Now, I have talked about this before on some Prime Video lists. It's available on Hulu now. This is a beautifully shot movie. Very dark, but it's got some great cinematography. It's about a young nurse who does in-home care, who is extremely religious, like almost repulsively religious in this movie. And there's something very, very dark going on under the surface. Now, this is an art house movie, but if you generally like those slower paced, moodier type things, this is a fantastic one. In fact, this almost feels like if Paul Thomas Anderson directed a horror movie. Not quite, but that's about as close as I can get. So if that sounds like you, Saint Maud is a really great movie. If you generally don't like art films and you like your horror movies to be wilder and crazier, you may want to steer clear of this one. My next pick, though, is actually nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture this year, which is very rare for horror movies. It's even more rare for them to win. I think only 2 have won, The Exorcist and Silence of the Lambs, which is kind of not technically a horror movie. And even though I don't think Nightmare Alley is going to win Best Picture, it still is an incredible movie from Guillermo del Toro. Now, he is far and away one of my favorite directors. I love his movies. I love the way they look. I love the concepts. I love everything. And I do have to say, even though Nightmare Alley is ranked at number 4, I was a little bit disappointed by it only because I love his movies so much. This one falls into the middle of the pack of his filmography for me, which is not a bad place to be, in the middle of Guillermo del Toro's filmography. But in Nightmare Alley, you follow Bradley Cooper's character, who is kind of this grifter that leaves the circus and becomes a medium of sorts. But Nightmare Alley also stars Cate Blanchett, Toni Collette, Willem Dafoe, and Rooney Mara. And it's easily one of the best looking movies to have come out last year. It looks incredible. The style, the aesthetic, the time period, all of it looks amazing. And it's incredibly long. It's over 2.5 hours long, which is unusual for a movie in this genre. And I would not go into Nightmare Alley expecting a full-on horror movie. Again, this one's fairly slow-paced, but it's incredibly interesting. Nightmare Alley really is more of a mystery movie with some horror overtones. And in that sense, it's a pretty good mystery. It is really interesting. It's also great to see all these actors doing really unusual roles for them. I enjoyed that. But above all else, it was just an amazing place to spend 2.5 hours. Guillermo del Toro's worlds are so rich and detailed, and Nightmare Alley is no exception. My next pick is an all-out action movie, like full throttle, balls to the wall action starring Frank Grillo, and it's actually a Hulu original, which means you're only gonna catch Boss Level directly on Hulu. As such, I think it is easily one of the best Hulu original movies that they've done. It easily could have come out in theaters. It's that level of a production, and it truly is non-stop action. If you like movies like Deadpool, trust me, Boss Level is going to be for you. But in this movie, Frank Grillo plays your typical action hero type guy, except he's waking up every day, Groundhog style, and he's having to fight off the same swarm of goons in the same fashion every day, and he's having to get a little bit further every time till he eventually works his way up to the boss level. So Boss Level actually feels a lot more like a video game than most video game based movies, because it's kind of structured like one on purpose. Not only do you get some really wild, over-the-top action, Boss Level is pretty funny as well, mainly because the concept is funny, so a lot of the jokes are concept-based, but still really funny, entertaining stuff. Everybody's great in this movie. Again, if you're a fan of movies like Deadpool, Boss Level is going to be for you. Now, Boss Level was one of those movies released mid-pandemic. In fact, that might be, I don't know, but it might be why it's a Hulu original and didn't get a theatrical release. But another one that was released for home viewing that easily would have done well in the theaters, and that honestly surprised me how good it was Love and Monsters. Now, I had this ranked at number 2 for a reason. This falls into sort of that teen action adventure category. In fact, they even have a star from The Maze Runner, which definitely falls into that category, and most of those movies are pretty mediocre. They try to capitalize on the success of movies like The Hunger Games, and they're okay. However, Love and Monsters has a lot more going for it than most of those movies. One, it's got a great sense of humor, and two, it's got a really interesting concept. So this takes place in a post-apocalyptic future where large insects have overrun the world. I know, it's unusual, and it works in this movie. Not only is the world realistic looking and immersive and everything, but the setup and the action and everything has some weight to it for a movie like this. They did a great job making this an adventure story with this main character. You're following him, you want him to do great. He's got a dog, you want the dog to do great. Michael Rooker has a great role where he shows up in the middle for a little bit, and there's some solid storytelling going on in this movie. I don't mean to oversell it. Love and Monsters is not The Godfather. It didn't reinvent anything. However, again, for this genre, the teen action adventure movie, Love and Monsters is miles beyond most of what you find in that genre. Alright, before moving on to my number 1 pick, I do want to say that Pig, starring Nicolas Cage, is one of my favorite new releases currently on Hulu. However, it topped my last Hulu list, so I didn't feel right including it here. If you have not seen Pig, and you've ever liked any Nicolas Cage movies, trust me, go watch this one. I know most of what he does now is just schlock. He gets a payday to do some crappy movies, but every now and then a really interesting creator hires him to do a movie. Pig is that movie. In fact, the reason he's in that movie is because it's gonna subvert your expectations. I think it's a beautiful movie that does not go in any directions that you're gonna expect, which is why it topped my last list. I liked it so much I felt like I needed to mention it again here for people who didn't see that video. I'll put a link to that video in the top pinned comment down below, along with the full list of all the movies discussed here. That way you can just scroll down there, do a screen grab with your phone, and there, you got the full list. But my number 1 pick also got picked to be number 1 because I never knew where this one was going. The Beta Test was written and directed by Jim Cummings. He also stars in it, and that is the reason to watch this movie. Now, you may not be familiar with him. He's only done a couple of other indie movies, Thunder Road and The Wolf of Snow Hollow. I think The Beta Test is his best work as an actor, as a writer, and director. Now, his friend in the movie is played by PJ McCabe, who also co-wrote and co-directed the movie. I felt like I needed to mention that. But you're going to be watching Jim's character lose his mind in this movie, and it's absolutely hilarious. So in The Beta Test, he plays a typical a-hole Hollywood agent who is engaged and gets a letter, an anonymous letter, for a sexual encounter at a hotel room. A blindfolded sexual encounter, no less, And of course, he goes through with it, and his life begins to unravel in a really surprising fashion, and it works. It feels realistic, and it's funny to watch him just completely lose his shit in this movie. He does a fantastic job. Again, that is the reason to watch it, to see his character lose his mind. But the story is twisted and has a lot of ins and outs and is really complicated for a movie done at this budget. You can kind of see some of the budget restraints. It looks like a lower budget movie a little bit. It's not bad, but for a movie at that level, for it to be this well written and this well acted is incredibly rare, which is why this one makes my #1 pick. If this sounds like a 50 Shades of Grey spin-off or anything, trust me, it's not. It's a very different type of movie. If you generally like my recommendations, especially things I describe as being surprising, the beta test is top-notch stuff. But that's the list. Let me know if there's anything you've seen recently that I might want to check out. Maybe one of your recommendations will make it onto a future video. Don't forget, all the movies I talked about are in the top pinned comment down below. I do that for every video. If you want additional movie recommendations, you can just go to my channel page and check out some of the most recent uploads. Thanks to CyberGhost for sponsoring another video. Their link is in the description and the top pinned comment. But I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this episode, and you will see me on the next one.